Hey gang, it's KR King of D&D Homebrew, and today I'm asking the question, how much combat should you have in your campaign? And by that I mean I'm opposing that to, the traditional pillars of an RPG game, which are combat, social interaction, and exploration. And already, some people just call the other aspect of this role play. I know there's arguments that when you are fighting as a soldier or as a wizard or whatever, you are technically role playing, so they really want to have that social interaction distinction. I think when you start to get down into the 6-second round world of most combats, that distinction of purely mechanical, now I'm doing this, I'm striking that, I have however many actions or whatever, as opposed to role playing, becomes a little blurry. But those are distinctions that I'm not as interested in here. And part of the reason is this can come up because if you look at games advertised online, you will see percentages given. Most often it's role play versus combat. Occasionally people will break it into the social interaction, exploration, and combat. But clearly a lot of people just think of anything besides combat as role play. And they do this because they want you as a person that might join the game to understand, what they're going to expect as you play the game. How much of it is roll initiative, right, and start fighting, and how much of it is social interaction and or exploration. And the differences you see in these percentages shows you that people are playing different kinds of games, the same rule system, the 5e, Pathfinder, OD&D, whatever it is, the same system, but, different types of games. And I use combat in my, as my title here, as my emphasis, because a lot of the statistics that you have in, say, traditional D&D for the beginning of the game till today are combat centered. How many hit points do you have? What's your ability to strike? What sort of spells? How do you heal? And all those things are built in, structured in a round type system where it's clear they're given to you in that time frame because that's when you're going to be using them. During the 6-second or your system 10-second or whatever it is round that makes up, combat. So people are very interested when they build characters to test out these abilities in combat, not necessarily in a social interaction or exploration. Now the skills that you have as a player in a game, whether it's a strict skill system or it's based on your attributes, charisma for persuasion or dexterity for, thief work or something, those are going to come in those other pillars. But most of these things, or at least the things a lot of people are interested in when they take feats or they take abilities, they think, how is this going to affect my abilities in combat? So it is kind of a major part of the game for a lot of people. And then for other people, it's not as interesting to them. They like the social interaction or exploration. They just get bored with combat endlessly, right? Especially really long combats. So what I'm going to do here is I'm breaking this down into kind of 3 categories of how much combat, as opposed to the other pillars, should you have. And the first one is your player's preference. What are they looking for? So that when I look online and I see a percentage and it's 10% combat, 90% role play, right? And I will get into that distinction of the issues with that. But let's say 10% combat, I may say, nah, I'm not interested in that. Someone else may say, this is exactly what I'm looking for. And vice versa. I mean, to me, I often will see when I just want to see how the description of the game, let's say 60% combat, 40% role play. We saw some of those. Well, that might be interesting. But it's not necessarily going to drive me to play or not play, right? But, and again, your group, if you've been playing with players for a long time, you know their preferences, and you may be tailoring your game to their preferences. But the second criterion that I would say is, what does the GM want? What kind of game do you want to play? If you're doing a sandbox homebrew like I do, I'm going to put a lot of time into that. And I want it to reflect the kind of game that I want to play. So then what happens is if you have players, let's say, whether in person or online or whatever, do they have to match exactly, right? Oh, you better have, and I've heard this from people. I started a game, it's a live table game, and one of the players said, well, all these guys like to do combat, so your game is a little more social interaction or exploration, that kind of thing. They might not like that. And I said, well, okay, I'm not really going to adjust, but let's just see what happens. Well, as it turned out, this group, they liked the social interaction. They loved the exploration. They love the mystery of the world and trying to put the dots together and figure things out and go to these ancient places and see, what happened here and why is this going on there, as opposed to just fighting. So it worked out, but they might have, and I have had players. I had a player in another campaign. He did not like social interaction at all. He did not like puzzles. He did not like, mysteries. He wanted to fight things. And he would sometimes sort of instigate fights to get things going. Because, he's spending his 4 hours, he's driving to the location that we were playing, and he wanted to do that. And this sort of a sore spot for the other players, but I understood that was the game he wanted to play. And we couldn't come to this point together in regards to what balance that should be. The third criterion is, what is the quality of the various pillars? What's the quality of your social interaction in your world? Is it really interesting? Do the personages seem realistic in the way you present them as the GM? Are the players engaged? Are they wanting to do social interaction, or are they just sitting there? They just roll, charisma check, see if we find out. Just roll a lore check. I don't want to do that, right? So you have quality on the player's side, and you have quality on your side as a GM. Is the combat interesting, right? Is it an endless slog? Is it unfair? Is it too easy, right? Are the players, it gets too complicated for them. They don't understand their character. Again, depending on your system, constantly looking at their character sheet and taking forever to make a decision, because that'll kill enthusiasm. If does a round take half an hour or something, And when you go up in levels in a lot of these systems, your characters get very complicated. And then you've got all these items that you've either found or purchased, or however your system works, or however you do it as a GM. And now they got all this stuff they've got to be thinking about. And then you as a GM, as things become more complicated and you have monsters or NPCs that are like high-level characters almost, that can be hard to run. So battles become a slog. They can become a slog when you just have hit point bloat, right? There are systems where, the monsters never quite hit enough. They just give them more hit points, so it's just slack. You just got to go round after round. It's just boring. Or the monsters are really deadly and everything, and the players become frightened to have combat, or they go into a combat and there's just a TPK or something like that, and then they roll up new characters and another one, and they're like, this combat sucks, right? So you have to have that balance of making combat. It's got to move quickly. It doesn't always have to be fair. You can have some that are easy, the players just win, and you have some of the monsters are going to win. And then you have some that are really extreme, but the players get fair warning. That's another thing. If things just comes out of nowhere in your world and kills everybody, you're not going to have players win, because that's not satisfying in terms of combat, right? So again, the players, what they want, the GM, what they want, and then trying to get together and finding a medium ground is affected by the quality. If players say, I'm not really into social interaction, they play in your world, it's really interesting, the social interaction, they're going to like it. And you're fair about, the ideas that they have. And it isn't just, well, your charisma's low, you suck. It's like they can come up with ideas and strategies, and the NPCs and, the sentient monsters, whatever it is they're dealing with, react in a reasonable manner. They'll be into that. And then the other thing is, as I said, even though I'm saying I don't necessarily object to just combat role play, right, as opposed to the social interaction exploration. I think the importance of those three pillars is exploration. Because I think if you have really interesting exploration, your players will start to really appreciate how, exploring a dungeon complex, part of it is that tense activity, not 6-second rounds, but like turns. Again, this depends on your system, but longer increments where you're going through and exploring rooms and corridors and entering chambers and finding inscriptions and runes, tapestries that tell some story. And then depending on whether your players enjoy this, I enjoy puzzles and things like that, and devices that you have to figure out. And I did a video a long time ago. I'm going to redo that puzzle thing, because I've had other ideas on it since then. But a culture that enjoys puzzles has puzzles. They make them. They're not hokey, right? that's another discussion. But the point is that how do you make the exploration phase interesting? And then the thing about exploration is you go along to a certain extent, and then boom, there's like a battle situation. And then you have that, however long, again, it should be a good quality battle. And then you go along and explore some more. And then maybe you meet some creatures that you can have some social interaction with. But it's purposeful. I told this about a recent video in role-playing, which again, I got slammed for using that, whatever. But I said, do they have objectives? Does it make sense that if they're not going to talk, they have a reason not to talk? And if they are willing to parlay or something, do they have a reason? Right? So that exploration can become something that is interspersed with combat and is interesting and is pregnant with possibility, as it were. Any moment you could have a combat. So in the end, what percentage of your game should be combat? Well, it should depend 33% on what the players want, 33% on what you want, and 33% on the quality, right? So I might have my percentage that I think about, but based on my experience with players and how they have responded to my game, your players may respond differently. You may have different ideas about it. So just think about those things and notice when you have your player's preference and your preference, then the quality that quality pillar. That's what you want to improve. That's what you want to think about. And then you guys will come to an agreement about what's best. All right, and a shout out to my Patreon supporters. I really appreciate you guys. Really love making content for you. Check out my Patreon page. Also, give me a like and a comment. Tell me about what I'd love to hear what percentages you guys think or know. Because again, it's kind of hard to really think that through. But what percentages you think are best in terms of combat, social interaction, exploration, or role play, however you want to define it. And of course, though, the most important thing, keep playing an RPG game, whichever one you choose, and tell somebody else about it.